So yeah, well, first of all, hello, Bex, and great to have a chat with you. And again, the first thing I want to find out is what the NLA actually is. What is the National Landscapes Association?
Yeah, great question. So, thank you for having me, Rob. Really nice to be talking to you. So, the National Landscapes Association is a membership body for the 46 national landscapes across the country. So, that's England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And you probably will have heard of what they were before, which is the areas of outstanding natural beauty. So, last year, the AONBs were rebranded.
Oh,
That
right,
was
okay.
something that we've needed. Yeah, we've needed that for quite a few years, really, and we finally made that big move last year, which is really exciting.
So, does that mean AONBs don't exist anymore then?
Legally, they do. That's still their legal designation. It just means that we've got a swear jar now. So whenever anyone says areas of outstanding natural beauty, they have to no. So yeah, look, when they were first designated, back in the 1950s, since then they face quite different pressures now, and
Right.
actually area of outstanding natural beauty doesn't really capture what they do. They're not just places to be looked at. They're living, breathing, working landscapes, and you know they they've been doing a lot to protect our nation's sort of natural and cultural heritage for a long time, and to face what we're facing going forward, it really did demand a bit more of a cohesive, joined up identity. So
Right.
that's what it's all about.
Okie dokie. So we'll come into the challenges that they're facing in just a moment then. But so AONBs, because Kent, you've got the Downs, obviously in Kent. That's an area of outstanding natural beauty. There's various bits that come under that. So is the NLA what's the word? Contiguous. So it's a great word, isn't it? Is it contiguous with the AONBs? So it's exactly the same footprint, or do you cover slightly more than it used to, or a bit's been left out? How does that actually work?
Yeah, no, so we are a membership body for them. So we essentially are their kind of national advocate and representative. So we advocate on policy, we speak on their behalf on that national level. So we do not work outside those boundaries on that kind of in that kind of sphere, but we
Mm,
very much have partnerships across the boundaries, and we work very closely with national parks and national trails and various other stakeholders as well. So
right.
whilst our sort of remit is within the national landscapes, we're constantly talking outside of them as well.
Okay. And so what are you doing?
That's a great question. So essentially, what I'm doing is our team. So I'm part of the nature-based solutions team. Nature-based solutions are not a new thing. I know there's something that you probably talk about quite a lot on the
Hmm.
on the podcast, but we've been brought in to look at private investment into nature. So we're looking a little bit wider now beyond the traditional public and grant sources of funding. We're looking at corporates now, private investments. How can we get more money into nature to do bigger, better, more joined up things? There's that phrase that we love. And so my job is essentially looking at the entire network of national landscapes and trying to aggregate opportunities, project opportunities that might be commercially kind of attractive to a business that wants to make a difference, in the UK, or they might have particular environmental obligations that they need to meet as well. And so I work with the various landscape lead officers to identify what are your challenges, where could private funding make a real difference, and what are the options in the nature markets at the moment? Because these are very new and evolving things,
Okay.
mechanisms. So that's
Because
that's what I'm doing.
because this is the thing, isn't it? That you're approaching lots of this stuff from a financial aspect, which is kind of for lots of people in the nature world, thinking about finances is something they'd rather not do. They don't want to have to think about the money. You have to think about the money and how you're going to actually use it. So what does that mean in pragmatic terms? Because there will be some people who think that as soon as you start talking about finances and nature-based solutions, oh, that means big companies coming in and greenwashing. That'll be where their brain will immediately leap to. So, well, firstly, is that part of what's going on here? Is this getting big business to try and salve their conscience?
It's a really great question, and the absolute core concern, both for us as a team and of course the national landscapes teams as well. So when we first started, our team, we said, right, what is our goal here? Is it to make money or is it to restore nature? And the overwhelming feeling and focus for us is to restore nature. So something that I say a lot when I go out and I collaborate with the National Trust and the Woodland Trust and the Wildlife Trust and all our other sort of stakeholder partners is, let's work together. We don't really care who gets the money. As long as nature is restored and the right things are happening for the environment, we don't really mind how. In terms of where the money comes from and corporate partners, again, we are really concerned with and aware of the risks of greenwashing. And so what we've done to kind of mitigate that risk is we've put an ethics charter together and a due diligence process. So we collaborated with the National Landscapes teams. We're also working with Finance Earth, which are a kind of social enterprise but expert consultancy in the green finance space, to figure out what are our hard lines, what are our, green, ambers and reds in terms of who we'll work with and who we won't. What's the kind of governance structure around this, and how do we, practically mitigate that risk whilst being realistic about what the opportunities are out there at the moment. Most businesses will be impacting nature negatively in some way. So unless we shut our doors to everybody, we're not going to be able to do very much. So it's about really managing that with our eyes wide open. It's about being open to working with businesses whilst they transition and clean up their act. There are regulations that are going to, that are kind of under development that are going to help us do that. So yeah, it's a fundamental concern, and all we can do is go in with, these are our standards and we expect this from our partners, and just take it as it comes, quite frankly. Okay. But yeah, I do want to make clear that we are talking money and it is finance, but for us at the heart, it's always nature and people, and that comes first.
Okay, so I mean, if we look at let's say the Darrant Valley Nature Recovery Scheme there, and I don't know how across that particular one you are, because I know that you're looking at everything from kind of Cornwall to Norfolk, aren't you? You've got a huge patch that you're across. Yeah. But so in Darrant Valley, you've got something like 1,800 hectares of land going along the River Darrant, sort of squeezed in next to the M25, but it's a chalk stream. The bits of it that are still lovely are just beautiful. It's incredibly lovely down there. Is that the kind of projects that you're looking to get involved in? When are you actually looking at landscape recovery across the broader sphere of things and trying to find ways of making that happen and trying to finance those things?
Exactly that. That's exactly what we're doing. So, smaller kind of localized pockets of conservation are super, super important. We do need that. And that's what mostly we've done up until this point. We've got funding. It's been relatively, limited, and it might be over a couple of years. And we've been able to do amazing things like that. But, in the face of the scale of the crisis that we're facing now, this, a planetary emergency, it really is that. We need to be looking bigger. We need to be joining up our efforts, and we need to be looking at that landscape scale so that nature has the space that it needs to move and be resilient and kind of face the climate crises that we're facing. So that's exactly what we're doing. So what we'd be looking at a project like that, we'd be saying, right, what's the scale of this? Are the landowners on board? Are they willing to work with us here? Are there similar things going on nearby or in adjoining landscapes that have similar characteristics? Are they open to working? And then we'll be looking at what the sort of funding mechanisms are that are available. So biodiversity net gain is the sort of hot one at the moment. There's nutrient neutrality. There's all these kind of nature market frameworks out there, and we'll be looking at what is kind of the best fit there and how can we make it as scalable as possible.
Okay, because obviously we know there's enormous pressure to build colossal numbers of houses across the UK. Something like 1.5 million over the next 5 years is the government's ambition. You can't do that without building on fields. And I know that, in Kent, there are dozens and dozens of sites that are going to be built on. And some of those areas, so just outside Medway Towns, for instance, this is about 3,000 homes are going to be going on greenfield sites that's on the top of the downs. So it's right on the edge of an AONB, but not necessarily quite on the footprint of itself. People are really kind of worried about that. And then when you start digging in the financial side of it and saying, well, we're going to protect nature and we're going to have biodiversity net gain and maintain nutrient neutrality and all those things, there's so many acronyms bandied about and there's so much money swilling around, people don't quite know which way to look to. So is the idea that the NLA is going to be the the go-to body for a landowner or a council or Kent Wildlife Trust or somebody to actually get the best advice? How does it fit into that jigsaw for people's concerns when they want to protect nature? Who do they go to first?
We're very much figuring that out ourselves at the moment. So, as the National Landscapes Association, as that national kind of representative, we don't have a huge amount of contact with the people and landowners in the communities. That's for each individual national landscape. They've spent decades getting to know, their kind of communities and the people on the ground. So we don't want to touch those relationships. There's something quite sacred there. We're not landowners and neither in the national landscape. So we are built on partnerships and strong collaboration. So in terms of the first port of call, we're very much figuring that out now. If biodiversity net gain is the direction we're going in and we are exploring it, we need to unpick that. So are we going to be what's called the responsible body? That's, part of that project. What's needed? Is that right for us? What does that mean? So we are very much on that journey now. And, the sort of green finance nature market world is so new that I think most stakeholders like us are also on that journey of figuring out where they best fit. And, I think it's worth saying that we are very much trying to collaborate as much as possible. So the national parks, national landscapes, and national trails work together now in the Protected Landscapes Partnership. And so there's a hub there for us, and that will then engage with the various other sort of the wildlife trusts and whoever else to make sure that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, that we're not trying to step on each other's toes, and that the environment, we sort of put forward this united front while we're trying to navigate these waters. So yeah, it's complicated and very much being ironed out as we speak.
And in terms of if you're a landowner, so say you're a farmer and you've got a patch of land that you're wanting to try and protect, and we know that farmers are under a colossal amount of pressure, and there's all sorts of concerns about their ongoing finances, the inheritance tax changes that might be going on. We've seen recently thousands of farmers descending on Westminster in their tractors, and Jeremy Clarkson getting involved and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of pressure there. Can landowners go to the NLA and say, right, I need a hand. I want to be doing more to protect nature. Will you help me find some money to do that? Is that part of the deal?
Yes, loosely, yes. I think it would be better to start with their local national landscape for sure. A lot of the national landscapes will have farm advisors. That's not always true though. The team sizes do vary quite a lot. We do still have a really fantastic funding stream called FIPL, Farming in Protected Landscapes, and that is due to finish early next year. We're really hoping that it will be continued because there's such huge pressure on our farmers to deliver so many different things, right? They can't be expected to do that without help. And so things like FIPL, it was essentially a much more flexible scheme than some of the other environmental land management schemes. And it allowed farmers and landowners to really take a lead in delivering nature recovery in a way that made sense for their land, their sort of communities. And it was an astonishing success. We went across the country and everybody said, never mind your green finance to a certain extent. We need FIPL. We need to keep FIPL because it's unlocked such amazing relationships. So some people listening might have actually been involved in that. But I would say, yeah, if you're a landowner or a farmer and you want advice, do go to your national landscape first. You're very welcome to contact us, but they will know you better. They will know the context better. So they're absolutely there and will talk to you for sure.
Okay. So you probably can't say it, but if I'm speaking to a government minister, I'm going to poke them in the chest and say, "Oi, keep FIPL. We need that." Please. Right. Okay. I'll do that for you. I'll make that happen.
Thank you very much. we have done that in the official way. So we have been putting some case studies forward because we've seen such amazing innovative work, and it just shows that when you put that money out into the grassroots, that the ideas are there, the creativity and the innovation, it's absolutely there, and it just needs the resource. So we've got some amazing examples. So we're hoping that it will continue in some capacity. Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about wilder carbon a little bit, which is one of Kent Wildlife Trust's sort of like big initiatives that they sort of budded off as a separate business effectively. And Heather Corrie-Vale is a former golf course that has been put out there for companies who are wanting to offset their carbon footprint when they are struggling to kind of meet that last bit. So we're talking about companies who are already doing their best to be as green as they can be, but there's a bit of carbon that they cannot get out of their system. So Grow Up Farms in Kent, for instance, is one of those, the vertical farm that we featured on the podcast in the past. Um, that kind of a project where you're talking about actually using nature to try and decarbonize and to make the environmental system and the business system cleaner and better. Again, is that fundamentally the kind of thing that you're looking to try and do with the NLA?
Absolutely. Yep. So, alongside our kind of right, what project opportunities are there out there in the national landscapes? What do we need for a viable project to go through what's called the investment readiness journey? Alongside figuring that out, we're trying to get very much involved in the actual development of the market, if that makes sense. So,
Mhm.
we've learned that there's a lot of things that are needed to make sure that both business needs and environmental integrity are met in a project. And what's fantastic about Wilder Carbon is that it's kind of acknowledging that yes, the carbon markets are kind of up and running. You know, we sort of understand them, we can measure them, quantify them, and it's very much becoming part of the language now, and you know, business kind of it's familiar to people and it's relatively comfortable. It's on that journey, but carbon is only one part of the story, right? We've got biodiversity much more generally is actually where the resilience needs to be, and carbon comes underneath that. So what Wilder Carbon are doing is trying to take the bigger, broader picture, you know, into consideration. And so at the association, wherever we can help feed into those things. So we have talked to the team about potentially trialing some things where they can perfect the metric and potentially work with us to better the Wilder Carbon standard.
Mhm.
Wherever we can do that, we are absolutely, you know, desperate to do it, because what that means is, as I said before, we can get that finance in, but we are doing the right thing for the environment. You know,
Yeah.
it's not about just planting trees. That's not right for every area. So, yes, in terms of what we're doing at the association, any opportunity we can have to feed into developing frameworks and regulations that make sense for nature, we want to do that.
I ask this of most people that I talk to because it kind of speaks to where I've come from in my journey thinking about the environment and where I am in the world. Are you more optimistic now than you were 10 years ago, or are you gloomier now than you were 10 years ago on the direction of travel?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. I think um, I'm cautiously optimistic, I think would be the right way to put it. What the thing that I love most about my job is that I am surrounded by people that care enough to be doing something about this big problem. And so, you know, what made me go into conservation was a kind of desperate need to help people understand how their daily behaviors are impacting the wider environment and how desperately we need to change some of that. And I'm not talking about restricting the way we live necessarily. I'm just, you know, I think there is a little bit of a an unfortunate view of environmentalists sometimes, in that we just want to stop people from flying on planes and eating meat, and that's not true for me personally. So I came into this to try and bring that realistic kind of, you can still live the way you want, but we do need to be a bit more aware. And since starting this job, I've only been more fueled that there are genuinely great, dedicated people out there desperately trying to do the right thing. So I think it's difficult not to be gloomy sometimes when you see the state of nature reports coming out, and COPs maybe not going the way we want them to, and politicians maybe not always prioritizing it in the way that we might like them to. But that, yes, I think generally on the whole, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I will do this because it's the right thing to do, regardless of whether I'm feeling like it's working.
Right. Okay. Well, we've got to keep plugging away, haven't we? We've got to keep
We
plugging away.
do.
So, as a final thought, then, what's your kind of call to action? What do you want people to go? Is that as the NLA, and if we're talking to farmers and landowners, or just people who've got a little patch of garden themselves, whatever it may be, anybody who's interested in nature, what do you, as the NLA, want to happen?
I think please be open to these conversations. I think we can be really scared of this idea of green finance and corporates and selling nature, right? I think nobody wants that. Nobody wants to sell nature. It's tragic that that's the position that we're in now, but we need to kind of put that aside and go, right. Unfortunately, we've taken from it for free forever, and we need to start paying that back now. So I think whatever you can do in your sphere of influence, whether that's your household or whether you've got land or whether you're in policy making, whatever it is, the nature and climate crisis impacts everything else. And so if we can all do something to be open to those conversations and be constructive in that world rather than trying to tear it down, it's kind of the case for anything. Let's stop name calling and dividing. Let's come together. We've done it before with trying to repair the ozone layer. We're taking lead out of petrol. We've done big things like this before. What's stopping us? So I think it's just about being more hopeful, more constructive in our messaging, coming together and being open to having really difficult conversations.
And I think there's
Lots
an element,
there.
yeah, there really is, isn't there? But there's an element there about valuing nature financially, which is something that people haven't really got their head around in the past. And I know that from the Azerbaijan COP that's been going on recently, the president of Azerbaijan was basically saying oil and coal are gifts from God for us to exploit. That's literally what he said, and that's the way that we have treated the earth for generations. And this really is the first time that people are genuinely and seriously talking about valuing nature financially for itself. And as soon as you start putting a cash value on something, then people think about it differently. You can make money out of having nature. You can actually turn it into a business, and then it has a value in its own right. And I think that if we can turn that corner and get enough people to start thinking in those terms, that there is value intrinsically in nature in and of itself. It's not just there to be exploited and extracted from. That's the point when you can actually start actively protecting it, because there's a return on it. Is that fair to say?
There is. And I think, the most important message I think I would want to get across there is for people to not worry about that, because we are putting numbers on nature. As I said, that's a tragic reality, but it will mean that we can do the meaningful work that we need to do. And the people doing that care. They're doing it because, speak for myself and on behalf of the national landscapes, those of us going into this are doing it with nature first. And so, yes, we are going to start treating it like an asset, and that's very much the financial world are in the process of trying to classify nature as an asset as well. So they are bought into this. They can see that it has that same potential for any other tradable entity. So commodity, yeah, exactly. And so, but we in the sector are, fiercely protective of nature and the environment and maintaining its integrity for the right reasons. So any money that comes to us, we are going to make sure that it's handled the right way and that it's not just in order to make a buck. So I think, it needs to go that way if we're going to recover the climate and the environment at the scale and pace needed, but we are doing it with the utmost care and love. That's the only reason we do these jobs,
Fantastic. Well, look, Bex, it's great to have a chat with you. I'm sure that we'll hear an awful lot more about what the NLA is and what it does as it kind of beds into our consciousness, because it's only new. It's only a year or so old, isn't it? So it's still baby steps at the moment for what it is, but we're going to find out an awful lot more. Thanks ever so much for having a chat.
Thank you. It's been brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Really enjoyed it.